came off the train and received a call from my dad. He had just read the letter I left for him, and he shared it with his friends about how touched he was with it. And as we were ending the call, I was so built up with emotion because it felt like, okay, so my dad's really interested in building this relationship with me. And as we were ending the conversation, I said, Dad, I love you. And at first, I'd been building it up. I was like, how would I slide it in? How would I slide it in? And I just decided, at the end of the conversation, I said, Dad, I love you. And I paused. And guess what? He said, I love you too. And I know for many people, this may feel like, okay, he said, I love you. But that shifted my whole perspective on what was possible. I can't remember ever hearing my father, prior to 2015, I couldn't remember my father saying, I love you, or me saying that to my father. You're listening to Journey to Fatherhood, a podcast that inspires and equips men to becoming more intentional and feeling more supported on the journey to fatherhood. Why wait to become a father before learning how to be a good one? My name is Chinedum Wenaya, a young man also on his journey with a desire to help men become great fathers despite their past personal experiences. I'll be sitting with different guests to bring you great value, sharing their knowledge and their experiences as we all embark on this amazing journey. This podcast, though targeted towards men, ladies, you will also gain great value from the conversations. Now, without further ado, let the journey begin. Hello and welcome to Journey to Fatherhood podcast. It's Chindim here, and today I want us to really focus on one particular thing, like the site title suggests, working within whilst moving forward. The reason why I wanted us to go in this direction, as I'm going to reveal, is because all along the time we've had speakers, we've had conversations, and I keep asking myself, are the listeners, are people that are watching or listening, are they really working within? Are they really taking the steps necessary to prepare themselves, whether they're going through manhood or journey towards fatherhood? But in the midst of striving for something, are you working within yourself to make sure that you're able to achieve that goal? The reason I really started this podcast, as I've said it again and again, is because I felt that so many men wait till they're fathers before learning how to become fathers, which involves in terms of healing from childhood traumas, learning how to be a good man in terms of being open, vulnerable, talking, and things like that. And I really wanted to really spin it off with this because everyone talks about what they would like to be or have in the future, but not enough people look within to address the very issues that could hinder them from achieving those goals. Take, for example, you want to be an amazing father when you grow up. You want to have a wonderful relationship with your kids when you grow up or when you get married and have kids. However, have you looked at how are things within my family? How are things with my relationship with my father, my mother, if they're present, my siblings, my extended families? How are you nurturing those family relationships? Are there areas you can learn from or areas you need to start working on to avoid when you get to that stage? And it's very important that we don't turn a blind forward, because this is not just motivational talks. The conversations we have on this podcast is not just to get you excited, but to impress upon you the need to act on these things that have been raised. Now, with everything, the aim is transparency and growth. Transparency, learning, and growth, because it all comes together. Now, going back to the example of, for me, I've always wanted to make sure that we talk about the importance of nurturing masculinity in the right way, nurturing healing, nurturing communication, transparency, all those amazing things. It's so important for it to be engraved in what we talk about. Now, we go back to the example. So you want to have a great relationship with your future wife and kids, but you haven't taken enough time to reflect on how the current relationship within your family is right now, with your parents and your loved ones. For example, my great desire to be a great husband and father to my kids in the future caused me to really start addressing the dysfunctional relationships I had with my father. As many may know, the reason why I'm so all out and in belief about the importance of communicating father and son, being vulnerable and open, is because I believe it helps the young man or the child that grows up to be able to understand that it's normal. It's normal to be able to be emotional. It's normal to be able to be expressive, to be vulnerable, to actually deal with areas of struggles with the people you love. And I want to expand on this a bit more, because for me, my journey into realizing that this was an error is because going back to when I was in university, in my first year, I remember sitting outside on the rooftop in my friend's house, and we were talking about relationship with fathers. He's an athlete and high expectations to compete in GB, Great Britain, compete for Great Britain, and all those expectations. And I was reflecting upon myself, and because I didn't really have a great relationship, or I didn't really have a relationship with my father growing up, it was not so much expectations, but more so desires to do better. But it was coming from a place of hurt and pain. And my friend raised that up with me, because in the pursuit of saying that I'm going to be a better father, I'm going to be a better husband, I had to also work on reflecting, okay, what do I currently have? What's currently residing within me? What's the relationship like? And that was when I realized that I had a very dysfunctional relationship with my father. And that was when it started with me, right when I went back to Nigeria with my family in 2015, wrote him a letter, just pouring my heart out about how I wish we could actually start building it, and I'd love to start forming that relationship. He read it, he was touched by it. And that was where we began working on developing that relationship, because the age gap is big. So my father and I were about 50 years age difference. And I'm sure for a lot of people, it's like, whoa. But my father's in his late 70s. I'm in my mid 20s, 25 at the moment. And it was one of those things where I had to make sure I didn't allow the whole age thing to pass away, because people could easily say, well, he's already old, he wouldn't understand. For me, I needed that. Some may call it closure or exposure. I wanted to work on nurturing that relationship. So it meant that I would call my dad. I believe that it was in 2015, December 2015, that I actually said for the first time on the phone to my father, I love you. And many people may have been used to this, or some people have not said it ever had that conversation or exchanged those words with their fathers. But for me, it meant so much. But I remember the phone call. I still remember it right now. I was at Birmingham. I was at London Euston Station. Came off the train and received a call from my dad. He had just read the letter I left for him, and he shared it with his friends about how touched he was with it. And as we were ending the call, I was so built up with emotion, because it felt like, okay, so my dad's really interested in building this relationship with me. And as we were ending the conversation, I said, Dad, I love you. And at first, I'd been building up. I was like, how would I slide it in? How would I slide it in? And I just decided, at the end of the conversation, I said, Dad, I love you. And I paused. And guess what? He said, I love you too. And I know for many people, this may feel like, okay, he said, I love you. But that shifted my whole perspective on what was possible. I can't remember ever hearing my father, prior to 2015, I couldn't remember my father saying, I love you, or me saying that to my father. Now, it was almost like that little kid in me just awoke and just said, oh, Daddy. That kind of, and you may laugh, but it meant a lot to me. That's the power of words. And I encourage people, even in my family right now, it's like, I tell my brothers, I love you. I tell my sisters, I love you. And I mean it genuinely. And if you're a father listening right now, let's make it okay. Let's make it normal for you to tell your boys and your girls, your kids, that you love them. Verbalize it as well as act on it. Don't just assume that they know. Make clear to them, say it to them as often as you can, and act in accordance to that love. And for me, going back to it, that conversation, to this day, I remember it made me want to go in tears. And I was just coming back from uni, from Coventry, so I arrived at London Euston, and I had a big smile on my face all through the journey back home. I sat down, talked to my mother about the whole conversation, and she was impressed. She was pleasantly delighted. She was delighted. She was happy to see that I was able to have that conversation. And that was when the excitement started growing and growing. But one thing that was important there was because I looked within me and realized back in 2015, before going to Nigeria, that wow, I actually resented my father. And because I resented my father, I didn't realize that my desire to be better was almost like, well, I'm going to show him, I'm not going to have anything to do with him. Listen, I was so hurt. The reason, when I started realizing all of this, I realized I was so hurt that I said to myself, well, when I get married, my father's not going to be there. That was back then in 2015, 2014, 2015. I didn't know I was that hurt. I didn't know I was in so much pain till I started looking within whilst moving forward. And I encourage so many men to do the same. Before you start aspiring to be the great husband, before you start aspiring to be the great future father, work within yourself. Have a look in your own home. What's going on in your own home right now? Your relationship with brothers, your sisters, your family members. Have you burnt the bridges? What's the conflict? Is there a conflict? Is there something that needs to be addressed? Are there childhood areas that you need to get professional help with to talk through it? Work within whilst moving forward, because as you approach that stage, there are certain things that if you haven't worked on them, they will hinder you from being able to enjoy those future goals. And it's so important. Was it easy? No. Was it easy having those constantly calling my dad, and it almost felt like there were times I'd call my dad and it was almost like, okay, we're back to square one. But I was persistent because I felt that I was doing this for me, not for him. I genuinely wanted to have a great relationship with my father, and I still I'm building a great relationship with my father. We were able to talk on the phone for a long period of times, genuinely about just talking to him. There are times where there was a time I had about 2 hours on the phone. My father and I were just talking about how he met my mother, what he went through in terms of the pursuit to marriage, bachelorhood, and whatnot. And his encouragement was, don't wait too long before you get married, because that's one lesson he always said, that he wished he married earlier, because he married in his 40s. And for many people, they haven't even had conversation with their dads. They haven't even had conversation with their fathers, or fathers haven't had conversation with their kids to tell them, okay, this is a bit about me. This is something, because that's a way to bond with a child. So these were things I was craving and I didn't even know, but I buried it in the sense that I thought, I'm not going to let myself get hurt. So that was why the resentment built up. But before you can move forward, you need to work within. And even in the midst of it, whilst I would have those conversations, there were even times where my siblings, where they weren't so sold on the idea because they felt, well, what's the point trying? And I still encourage them from time to time. Now we all talk to my father from time to time. We pick up the phone and we speak to him. It was one of those ones where whenever I was on the phone, when you're at home and you haven't you got someone on the line and you want to pass it to someone else, you will be saying, well, speak to this person, and that person's like, no, not me, pass it to someone else. That was what we were doing. Most of the times I call my father and I want to pass it to my younger brother, and he'd be like, no, I don't want to speak to him, talk to someone else. But we eventually went from all of that, and now we're building relationships. And I want to encourage men, fathers, young men, that it's never too late to build those relationships with your families. If your father is alive, if you're fortunate to still have your father, build those relationships. Whatever it is, no matter how painful or how horrible it was, find a way to heal and then build that relationship if possible. Because it's something wonderful and it helps you free yourself. It's even better for you to do so that you can heal and be able to nurture a wonderful relationship with your kids. If you're a father right now and your father's not around for you to make the atonement, sort things out, find family members, or just find a way to heal within so that you can start building those relationships with your kids. And like I always tell people, you don't need You don't need to be a biological father to a child for you to be a mentor or father figure. Help them deal with those things, because one of the main issues, one of the main things that I've come to realize is that a lot of the time guys don't talk. And that's one of our major problems. A lot of guys don't talk. Going back to having to work within myself, it was through working within myself that I started realizing that there were some traits and certain behaviors that I'd been influenced by my upbringing. Whilst the lack of emotional presence with my father was physically there. He still, thankfully, my mother and my father are still married. However, even though he was in a house whilst I was growing up, he wasn't present. He was physically there, but he wasn't emotionally involved in my life. And over time, my mother has always been a hardworking woman, and over time, without realizing, in my adult age, in my late teenage years and adult years, I started realizing that I had a very strong tenacity. I was hardworking. However, it also meant that because I'd seen my mother pretty much play the role of a single parent, even though they were still together, I always pushed myself so hard that sometimes I'll be so hard on myself, trying to overcompensate, doing so much and not being able to feel comfortable resting, or not even give myself a chance to rest. And what that would result to is burnout. And I'll be burnt out, stressed, anxiety, worry, all combined, because in my head I'm like, I've got to do this, I have to be this, I have to do this by this age, I've got to do all of this by this age. And I was put so much pressure on myself, but in my head I disguised it as work ethic. But a lot of it was coming from a place of insecurity. And these were things that came to my awareness because I took the time to start reflecting. I took the time to start working and digging in. And the reason why many people don't do the work is because the work is hard. Imagine having to come to realize that you actually stress too much or you worry too much. Sometimes it's almost, for me, when I was realizing that, because I'd heard it from people, but I didn't want to admit it because I felt that I was just driven. But when you start working on it, it's tough to admit. And sometimes when you have to look at the traumas of your childhood when you were growing up, it's tough to admit. But you need to go through that work in order for you to be able to walk the remaining journey with sweet, 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 sweet growth. It's important. It's important. Because growing up, for me, I think a lot of the resentment came from, I remember growing up, and my mother had meant no ill will in it, but she would always say, I don't want you guys to end up like your father. I don't want you guys to end up like your father. So my whole association with my father was, don't be anything remotely like him. However, the great thing I appreciate my mother for was that in spite of it all, she also told us, make sure you check up on your dad. Make sure you call your dad from time to time. Make sure you build that relationship with him. She still loves my father. So it was all those things where at a point it was confusing for me, because I had to come to accept that I need healing. I need to do as much as possible to see if I can resolve or revive a relationship with my father. And that's doing well. I'm working towards trying to bring him over to the UK. And those are things that I'm excited about, that whenever I go on the phone with him, even till this day, I'm 25, even till this day, when I'm talking to my father, I feel like a little kid inside all over again. Whilst we respect each other in terms of maturity, he understands we speak as adults. However, there's still that joy as a kid. And I encourage you fathers out there, if you're an existing father, please spend time, verbalize your love for your child with him, and do things that also replicate or represent that you truly do love them. And if you're listening to this right now and for some reason that you still feel that, no, I can never forgive him, or no, I can never try to fix things with my father, please rethink that. Because sometimes that resentment in you can boil over to breaking in your future relationships with your kids. Find time to forgive. Whatever it may be, find time to forgive. If he wasn't present, if he chose not to be present, find time to heal for yourself. And I want to take this even further and just encourage all the guys listen to this. Bro, it's okay for you guys to come around with your male friends together and to talk to your boys and say, listen, bro, I love you. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. Don't let society or the toxic masculinity make you feel that, well, that's not manly. Listen, let's put away with that. There's nothing wrong with calling up your friend without any occasion and just saying, hey, bro, how you really do it? There's nothing wrong with you going to a male friend, one of your male friends, and telling them, listen, I'm going through a tough time. Are you okay to talk? And talking through the situation. You don't, like I said in the last episode, you don't have to be in a relationship before you can be open with someone. You don't have to be in a romantic relationship before you can be open with someone. You can be open with your friends, your male friends, your guys, your boys. Be vulnerable. There's nothing wrong with that. True friendship is there to build you. It's there to help you grow. And before something grows, it has to be dug up. The sand needs to be dug up. Space needs to be created. The seed needs to be planted. Over time, planting goodwill, love, and all these wonderful things. Because, like I said, before you plan to move forward, you need to work within yourself. Because when you grow up, if you grow up, I pray that you will be a wonderful husband and a wonderful father. And the traits of those things are being able to be transparent, being able to express your emotions with your child, reinforce the right emotions, being able to actually sit down with your child and say, I love you. Because a lot of men struggle with this, even those that don't have kids. Even when they get into serious relationships and they get married, they find it hard to really, even though they love their partners or their wives, they find it hard to say it, verbalize it, or even express it, because they didn't really work on healing from the hurts and the pains growing up. And even if they didn't have anyone that did the same or expressed their love for each other or verbalized or said things like I love you around them growing up, because they didn't have that, they just feel that it's normal not to say those things. Well, I'm telling you, it's normal to say those things. It's absolutely normal. It's very important to say things like that. And I hope as you listen to this, that you're not just nodding your head, but you're nodding your head and you're going to write down those areas that you need to work on. That not only are you going to write down those areas, you're going to pick up the phone, speak to your friends, speak to your male friends, speak to your father, speak to your son, speak to your siblings, whatever it is. Try the best that you can to build those relationships, to fix those relationships, to receive that healing. In saying all of this, self-awareness and acting on it are not always easy roads, but always worth the journey. Because sometimes you may be willing to work through it and the other person may not be. However, as much as you can, seek healing, seek growth, because those things are what will serve as a strong foundation. Take some time to reflect. Write down the areas in your lives, maybe in your lives, areas in your lives, your family mindset that you need to address. If it's overworking that you didn't realize was you just overcompensating for validation, to validate yourself through those means because you never really got validated as a child growing up. It's hard to be honest with yourself and admit that, but it's important to admit it now and work on those things. It's so important, because trust me, you don't want to wait till you become a father before you finally start addressing these things, because some of these areas take years for you to address them. And if you don't address them, it can affect who you end up with. It can affect how you become as a man in general, and how you become as a father, and all those things. And if you're listening to this right now and you're already a father, it's still not too late. Because fatherhood is not just a destination, it's a continuous journey. So you can still take time to work on yourself, self-awareness, reflect on those areas and work on those areas. Seek professional help if you need to. I keep saying this because I genuinely have a heart for all the men out there. You are loved. If you never heard it before, you are loved and you deserve to be loved. And yes, you can love. Love yourself enough to get the healing done. Love yourself enough to be able to admit that there are areas in your life that you need to work on and work on them. Love yourself enough to not only listen to this episode, but act on that episode. Act on the messages we've shared. And with that, I want to encourage you. If this has helped you, if today's episode has helped you, please share it to a friend. Have a conversation with someone. Make sure you feel free to share your stories with us. Leave a review on the podcast. Also, feel free to send us a message on our Instagram page at Journey to Fatherhood, or tweet us at J2Fatherhood. That's J2Fatherhood on Twitter. Subscribe to our YouTube channel on YouTube, Journey to Fatherhood. I just want us to create a normality for guys to talk. My vision is that it will be okay for guys to openly have conversations about how they're feeling to get the right healing. If not for yourself, do it for your future kids. If not for yourself, do it for your present family. If not for yourself, do it for the good of community, of society. Because with every man that is able to walk tall from healing and be able to stand strong healed, that's another man that can influence many more men to be the best versions of themselves. It's Chinedum here, and it's been a complete privilege and a complete blessing and an honor to be able to speak from my heart. And I hope you've heard. I hope you can act on this. Have an amazing week ahead. Till next week. Take care.